This is the lineup of a Bolivian football team. They played in the country's top league up until 2023, when they were kicked out of the competition. And it's all because of one of these players. He flies on private jets, drives a Lamborghini, and has mansions all around the world. But he's not actually a footballer. This is Sebastian Marset, and underneath his flashy lifestyle is a terrifying world of crime. With a single text message, he can order the death of top prosecutors or powerful businessmen. Even the media are scared to report on him. The true source of his money is an international drug network worth billions. He is one of the most wanted men on Earth. His empire will take us deep into shadowy networks of South American crime and to the highest levels of power, where the president, government, and police are all involved. But how did he become so powerful? And how did he end up on a football team without getting caught? To understand, first, we have to go back to where it all began. Sebastian Enrique Marset Carrera was born in 1991 in Piedras Blancas, a working-class suburb of Montevideo, Uruguay. Uruguay was still wrestling with its bloody history. It was coming out of a 12-year-long dictatorship full of violence and oppression. Tens of thousands had been arrested, and as many as 500,000 had fled the country. Uruguay was reimagining itself as the Switzerland of South America, with a strong banking industry and low taxes. However, in young Sebastian Marset's world, crime and violence surrounded him. He was developing street smarts for survival. At school, though, he was getting top marks. He was a talented artist who sang in a band, and a keen football player too. As a teenager, he worked a job at a gas station. On paper, he was on track to become a positive member of society, but Sebastian knew a regular job would never get him what he really wanted: wealth and power. Slowly, his dark side took him down a different path. It started with petty crimes. First, stealing, then dealing small amounts of drugs. Sebastian's strength was his ambition. There was no task too big. And so, when he was asked to pick up a load of marijuana arriving at an airport, he didn't hesitate. Unfortunately for Sebastian, his first major job was a failure. Police arrested him before he ever even got his hands on the shipment. He was sentenced to 5 years in Libertad prison. But once he arrived, Sebastian realized that all his fellow inmates were in the same business. And this was where he made his most important connections. When Sebastian was released from prison in 2018, he hadn't learned his lesson. What he had learned was how big an operation he could really build. He began traveling around South America, linking up with some of the connections he made in prison, like the Italian mafia and the Brazilian organized crime syndicates. This time he would be the one in charge, and there was no room for error. In the space of a few months, Sebastian put together one of the most sophisticated drug trafficking operations in the world, called Cartel Uruguayo. The operation began in Paraguay. Small planes would take off as usual, but shortly after takeoff, they would abandon their routes and turn off their radar, making them invisible to air control. Instead of landing on a sanctioned runway, they would descend onto tiny farms in nearby Bolivia before loading up tons of goods and flying them back to Paraguay. From the air, they would take to the water, floating inside containers packaged like agricultural products, more than 1,000 miles away, to Uruguay. This was the final checkpoint before ships were let through to the Atlantic Ocean. Next stop, Europe, usually Belgium or the Netherlands. Inside, there were no agricultural products. Every single one of these ships carried $20 million of cocaine, the world's most lucrative drug. And the Cartel Uruguayo fast became one of Latin America's most important players. With that, Sebastian Marset's power grew too. Other than his narcotics empire, he started a car dealership, a martial arts center, and a music production company. But by 2021, he was doing something no one expected. He was making his professional football debut with Club Deportivo Capiata, a Paraguayan football team playing in the 2nd division. He gave out thousands of dollars to his teammates if they performed well. He arrived to training in a Lamborghini, lived in a penthouse, and had effectively bought the entire club. This attracted an enormous amount of attention, and by May 2021, Sebastian heard that the police were on his tail. He quickly vanished, popping up a few months later again at a different club, Rubio New, about 20 miles away. Just when investigators were close to catching him, Sebastian disappeared once again. He always seemed to be one step ahead, but pressure was building. Sebastian Marset's crimes were about to catch up with him, and he would need to use all his resources to break out of prison. In October 2021, after disappearing off the map for months, Sebastian finally resurfaces, not in Bolivia and not in Paraguay, but on an entirely different continent, in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. He is dressed in white, sleeping on the floor, and behind bars. he had been arrested at the airport for traveling with a fake Paraguayan passport. But despite being described as a dangerous and heavy drug trafficker by Uruguayan and American authorities, Sebastian wasn't about to be extradited. He still had an ace up his sleeve. While he waited, Sebastian sent a powerful message to anyone daring to cross him. His anger was focused on a businessman named Mauricio Schwartzman, who gave him the Paraguayan passport that had landed him in trouble. As Sebastian sat in a prison cell 8,000 miles away, a team of highly trained mercenaries broke into Schwartzman's mansion, taking a bodyguard and worker hostage. Then, they waited for Schwartzman to arrive. When he did, he was shot to death. And things were about to escalate even higher. The man put in charge of the murder investigation was a top prosecutor, Marcelo Pecci. Pecci had recently delivered a devastating blow to Sebastian Marset's operation, seizing vehicles, private jets, yachts, and other property in the largest anti-trafficking operation in the country's history. In total, the assets were worth over $100 million, all belonging to Sebastian Marset. Now, Marcelo Pecci began digging into Schwartzman's murder, putting the pieces together and slowly uncovering Sebastian's involvement. Then, Marcelo took a break from work. He had just gotten married and was going on a honeymoon to Baru, a Colombian resort destination. While there, his wife made an Instagram post with more good news. She was pregnant. Just 2 hours after that post, 2 men sped up to the beach on a jet ski. One jumped off, treading through the shallow water directly toward Marcelo Pecci, who was lying on the beach, relaxing. The man pulled a gun from his pocket and fired 2 shots, one in the back and one in the face. Marcelo Pecci was dead. The assassins had been paid $500,000 to pull off the hit, and when authorities were close to negotiating a deal with a suspect, that suspect was killed too. When that suspect's personal notebook was recovered by police, one name stood out to them: Señor Marset. The notebook also linked high-ranking Paraguayan officials to the murder, even the president. These kinds of connections explained why Sebastian Marset was approved and delivered a new Uruguayan passport straight to his Dubai jail cell, and he was let out the front door. The passport scandal eventually led to the foreign minister and the interior minister resigning. In the meantime, Sebastian was free. He was now under a red notice on Interpol and wanted internationally. The US, Bolivia, Paraguay, and other countries were all after him. Sebastian was just 30 years old. He had built the biggest drug empire on the continent, made connections to the most powerful people in Uruguay, and amassed over $1 billion for himself. But was his luck finally about to run out? Would his childhood dream end his freedom once and for all? In May 2023, Sebastian turned up in a familiar place, on a football pitch. This time, he was in Mexico, playing for the El Torno Football Club and wearing the number 23 jersey like his hero David Beckham. Just as before, police were slowly closing in. Despite using a fake name, he had shown up in team pictures and even live streams of some matches. When police began surveilling the area, Sebastian's bodyguards drove out to assault, kidnap, and harass them. While they were distracted, Sebastian Marset once again disappeared. 2 months later, he was sighted for the last time in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. Police raided his mansion, but by then, there was no one inside. Over 2,000 officers carried out a huge manhunt in the area. A reward of $100,000 was offered to anyone with information. But it was no use. Sebastian was long gone. For a final time, he had been one step ahead. He had escaped with his wife and children in a Land Cruiser just moments before police arrived, probably into Brazil. He later sent a message to major Uruguayan news channels. Si siguen haciendo artículos periodísticos de mí habrán consecuencias. Soy Marset. Translated, it read, "If you continue making articles about me, there will be consequences. I am Marset." Attached was an image of a pile of pistol magazines. The message was clear. Report on Sebastian Marset and risk being killed. He didn't want any more publicity. And given his bloody track record, this wasn't an empty threat. Since then, no one has reported seeing him. Has Sebastian Marset retired? Or has he managed to silence the media while he works from the shadows, planning an even bigger move? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more in-depth documentaries. It really helps us out.